Okay, folks, first thing we're going to do to set up Imperial Settlers is we're going to select a faction. Okay, each player is going to select one of the 4 factions. Okay, we have the Barbarians, the Romans, the Japanese, and the Egyptians. Alright, now when a player selects a faction, they will take the faction board, the faction score token, and the faction deck. Okay, each faction deck consists of 30 cards. Alright, additionally, if you're playing the Egyptians, there are these tokens that you will also take while playing the Egyptians. Okay, now in this game, Jen and I will be playing with the Barbarians and the Romans. I will be the Barbarians, Jen will be the Romans. So any other faction boards, decks, score tokens, and additional tokens will be returned to the box. They will not be used. Okay, so once I said you select your factions, Jen will be the Romans in this playthrough. Now the player boards have a male and female side. Okay, there's no other difference than the male and female side. Okay, all the resources and actions and whatnot are the same on both sides. You know, so you select which side you want to use. Jen will be the female naturally. Okay, so she'll take that and her faction deck and her score token. Okay, I will do the same. Okay, next thing we're going to do is take the scoreboard, place it where everybody can reach it, you know. And then we are going to take the round marker here, and we are going to place it on the first round, naturally. Okay, then each player is going to take their score token, okay, which is the color of their faction. And the only way you can differentiate these colors is by the name of the faction on the player board and also by the card backs of each faction deck. Okay, the Barbarians are green, so I'll place the green faction token on 0, which is the Barbarians. Jen is the Romans, they are red, she'll place her token on 0. Next we have these raise tokens, okay, these swords tokens. We're going to place a stockpile of those where everybody can reach them. These are workers. We will do the same thing for the workers. There are 3 basic resources in the game. There's wood, represented by these wood tokens. Stone, represented by stone tokens, naturally. Food, which are represented by these apple tokens. And then we have gold, which is a wild resource, basically. They could represent any of the 3 basic, gold, stone, or food. Okay, we'll place them in a stockpile where everybody can reach them. Now for each faction, we will take one of these defense shields, okay? And we will place them where everybody can reach them. Any additional shields will be returned to the box. They're used for expansions that'll come in the future, okay? They will not be used for the game now. Each faction only gets one of these defense shields. The game also comes with these resource multiplier tokens. I've never used them in a 2-player game, so I'll return them to the box. But you can keep them out if you choose to. Okay, just place them where everybody can reach them. These cards here are used for the single-player variant. Okay, they will not be used in this game, so replace them to the box. Return them to the box if you are not playing the solo game. Okay, these cards here are the common cards. Okay, we're going to give this stack of cards a shuffle. We are also going to shuffle our faction cards. And then out of those decks, we are going to draw 2 common cards for each player. And 2 faction cards for each player. Now, once we have done that, we will select a first player. In this case, it'll be Jen. And we will give them the first player token, showing that they are going first. And that is how you set up Imperial Settlers. Okay, folks, here we go. Imperial Settlers. Now, the object of Imperial Settlers is to build the biggest empire we can, represented through victory points. Okay, at the end of 5 rounds, the player with the most victory points will win the game. They have the biggest empire. Now, before we get into the game, let's look at the cards. Okay, now, as I said, there's 2 different types of cards. We have common cards, and then we have faction cards. Now, the faction cards are different depending on which faction you have, okay? And the common cards can be used by anybody. All right, now each of these types of cards is considered a location, okay? Now, if we look at the common cards, we'll see that they're laid out almost the same as a faction card with a couple differences. Okay? Now, with the common cards and the faction cards, in the upper left corner of the card is the cost to build them. Okay? Now, with the common cards, it's usually just resources. With the faction cards, you may need to discard a location, whether it be a faction card location or a common location. Okay? And we'll get into that later on in the overview here. Alright? Now, below that on both are the artwork, and below that is the name of the card, and next to that is a star, which represents victory points. Okay, now at the end of the game, each common card you built in your play area here will be worth 1 victory point. Each faction card built in the play area will be worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. Okay, now below that tells you the effect of the card on the common cards and also on the faction card. Okay, to the side of that and behind the name of the card is a collar, and this represents what type of building you are building. Okay, there are 8 different types of colors associated with the different cards, whether they be common or faction cards. Okay, now that's basically how the common cards read. Okay, now with the faction cards, there's a couple more differences. You cannot raise a faction card unless you are playing the Japanese. That faction, you can raise the faction card for 1 point. We'll get into that later. Okay, now if we look at the bottom of the faction cards, we'll see this blue area, which will let us make a deal. Okay, and the way to differentiate a faction card and a common card is from the back of the cards and that deal. Okay, every faction card has a deal section on it. The common cards do not. Okay, now if we look in the lower right corner of the artwork on the faction cards, we will see that faction symbol. Okay, and it could go from 1 to 3 of these symbols in that area. This represents the rarity of the card. There are 30 faction cards. Now, out of those 30 faction cards, there is a number of cards that have 3 faction symbols on it, and then there's some that have 2 faction symbols on it, and some that have 1 faction symbol on it. Okay, if there is 1 faction symbol on it, there's only 1 of that card in the faction deck. If there's 2 symbols on it, there's 2 of that card in the faction deck. And then if there's 3 faction symbols on it, there's 3 of that faction card in that deck. Okay, so that represents the rarity of the card in the faction decks. Okay, so that's basically the cards. Now, out of these cards, there are 3 different types of cards. We have production cards, feature cards, and action cards. Okay, and they will say what they are in the text of the card, okay, below the name of it. Like this one here, the pig farmer is an action card. Okay, if we look at another one, like the gallows here, the gallows is a feature card. And then we have production cards, and it'll say that in the first part of the description of the card, and they're italicized. Now the game is broken up into 4 different phases. Okay, the first phase is the lookout phase. During the lookout phase, a player will draw 1 card from their faction deck and place it in their hand. Okay, now this is only done once throughout the phase. Okay, the next step of the the lookout phase is to draw a number of common cards equal to the number of players plus 1. Okay, so in a 2-player game, we will draw 3 common cards and place them face up. In a 3-player game, we will draw 4 common cards and place them face up so everybody can see them. Okay, now once we have placed these cards face up so everybody can see them, the number of players plus 1, okay, the first player will select one of these cards. Okay, they will take that card and place it in their hand. Okay, then it'll continue to the player to our left. They will take a card, okay, and place it in their hand. The final card will be discarded. Okay. Now, we will do this again, taking a number of cards equal to the number of players plus 1. And we will do the same thing. However, this time, the last player will select the first card, and it'll go clockwise. Okay, until there's 1 card left, and then that card will be discarded. Okay? Now, the next phase of the game is the production phase. Okay, now each faction produces different resources depending on the faction. Okay, however, every faction will receive one of these defense tokens along with a raise token during the production phase. Okay, and then depending on the faction, you will take whatever that faction produces. In the case of the barbarians, it will be 5 workers. We will take those 5 workers and place them on our faction board. Okay. In the case of the Romans, it is 2 workers. Okay. A raise token, a defense token, a wood, and 1 stone. Okay. Now every round you will do this for your faction board. However, in later rounds, other than the first round, you will also produce any cards that you have built in the production section, whether it be faction or common cards, and also any deals. Okay? So that's the production phase. Next we go into the action phase. Okay, now on a player's turn, starting with the first player, a player can do several actions. They would take 1 action and then play would pass to the player to their left. Okay, now the first action a player can do is build one of those location cards, like I said. Okay, now as long as they have the resources, they can build a card. So, let's say Jen, being the Roman, is going to go first. She could build the armor here, okay, which cost 1 stone and 1 wood. Okay, so she would pay the stone and wood to the supply and place that card next to her faction board. Okay, now as I said, there's 3 different types of cards in the common and faction decks. There's production cards, feature cards, and action cards. Ignacy recommends that you place the common cards to the right of your player board and the faction cards to the left of your player board, and you place the cards in the different sections that they correspond with. So Jen built this armor card, which is a common card, and it's also a production card. So she places it here to the right of our board at the top where the production is. Okay, now when you build a production card, you automatically gain the resource of that production card. Okay, now some cards, like the Lumberjack's route here, also have a building bonus. Okay, in that case, you would gain the wood for the production of it and the building bonus when you build the card. And then in subsequent turns, you would only gain the production resource for it. Okay, now all the faction cards just cost you a resource to build. Again, that's in the upper left-hand corner of the card. If you were going to build a faction card, like say the trade colony here, as you can see, it costs a bunch of resources. It will cost a wood, 2 stone, and then we have this house symbol, which means you have to discard a location. Okay, now all of the cards are considered location, whether it be the faction cards or the common cards. Alright, so in order to build this card, you would have to spend the resources and then discard a card that was previously built. Alright, and then again, you would place it in the appropriate section on your player area. Okay. Now, some cards do not cost anything to build, such as this ruins. Okay, it's free to build. It'll say that up there. It'll give you 1 worker as a building bonus, and that's all it does. It's a one-shot deal. Okay, if you play that, simply place it down. Okay, now once you have taken that action, play would pass to the player to the left. All right, and then that player would take their action. Okay, you can make a deal. As you can see, the faction cards have this blue ribbon on the bottom of it. That is the deal. In order to make a deal, you would spend 1 food, and then you would place the card underneath your board up top where it says deals. Okay, now these cards have to come from your hands. They cannot be cards that were already played. Okay, but once you do that, you would gain the resource from the card right away, and then each production phase would also gain that resource. So in this case, we would gain wood right away, and then each production phase we would gain another wood. Now another action you can do is you can spend 2 workers, okay, and place them down here, and then you could trade those workers in for one of the 3 basic resources, wood, food, or stone, or you could trade those 2 workers in for a card, whether it be a common card or a faction card. It's your choice. Okay? Another action a player can do is raise a card. Okay, now, if we look at our common cards, we will see in the upper right-hand corner the resources that player would get to raise that card. Alright, now if you're going to raise your own cards, it has to be a card that is in your hand, not one that is laid out in your player area. Okay, you would simply then spend a raise token, return it to the supply, and gain the benefit from the card that you're raising. In this case, it would be a food and a worker. You would take those resources, place it in your player board. Whoops. Okay, and then you would discard the card. Okay, now, if you were going to raise an opponent's card, let's say I built this one here. It's an action. Okay, and Jen wanted the stone and the gold off of the Mason's Guild. Okay, in order for her to do that, she would have to spend 2 raise tokens. Okay, she would spend those 2 raise tokens, and then she would collect the gold and the stone, put it in her, put it on her player board. However, she raised that, so this would turn around and become a foundation for me. And I would gain 1 wood out of the deal. Okay. Now, normally you can only raise a common card, with the exception of the Japanese. Now, with the Japanese, it works the same as any other faction. Okay. The Japanese can raise this while they're in their hand, or if they had them laid out in their player area, a player would spend 2 raise tokens, and they could raise the card and then gain 1 victory point. As a free action, during their turn, a player can place these defense tokens on any of their cards they wish to. Okay, and this acts as a defense against being raised. Okay, so if Jen laid this defense token out, it would cost me an additional raise token to raise that card. Okay, this is actually a bad example because it doesn't have a raise value. But, okay, let's say the Japanese player here. Okay, I want to raise this card. It would cost me 3 raise tokens instead of 2 to raise this card because of this shield. Okay, now, as I said, it's a free action to play that token, but once it's down, it has to stay on that card until the end of the round. Okay, now, the Japanese are a little different, whereas they get what is known as samurais. Okay, in order to play a samurai, they act like defense shields, but they have to take a worker from their resource pool on their player board and place it on the card. Okay, they could do this whenever they want throughout their turn. It's a free action as long as they have workers on their board to do it. Okay, and instead of going away at the end of the round like a defense token would, the samurai stays on that card throughout the game. Okay, and as I said, it costs an additional raise token in order to raise that card if the card has a samurai on it. So theoretically, if you're playing as the Japanese, you could have a card that would take up to 4 raise tokens in order to raise that card. Okay? So that's how raising works. Now, another action a player can take are any action cards that they have in their player area. Okay? So in the case here of the barracks, I can spend 1 worker and I can gain a raise token from the supply. Okay, now most of these can only be done once. However, some of them, like the barracks here, say maybe activate it twice. That means you can activate it twice. You could do this once and then wait a little bit and do it again, or you could do it both at the same time. Okay, activate it twice and then just gain the benefit of the card twice at one time. Okay, now it's suggested to place the resources that you're using on the action cards on the card themselves to keep track of how many times you use them. Okay. Now, as I said, there's also feature cards in here, and the feature cards will give you a benefit depending on what the card is. Okay, most of the time it's something like victory points or stuff like that. Let me see if I can find one here so I can show you. Okay, here we go. Like this one here. Say I built this one. It's a feature card. Okay, and it says it's the supplier. Okay, it's a feature. Each time you build a gray building, a gray location, you gain 1 coin and 1 victory point. That's what the star means. Okay, so this is like a free action. It's done as you're building stuff and whatnot. Alright, so say I built a card, I would gain the benefit for the card itself because it is a gray card, and then I would gain 1 coin, okay, and 1 victory point. That's what the star is. Okay, and we move our token up 1 space on the board. Now, later on in the game, say I built another gray building, okay, I would then gain the benefit of the feature again. Okay, so I gain another victory point and another coin. Okay, when a player cannot do any more actions, they will simply pass. Once a player is passed, they cannot be affected by the other players, meaning that another player cannot raise any of their cards and another player cannot take any actions against them. Once all players have passed, we go into the cleanup phase. The next phase is the cleanup phase. During the cleanup phase, you will remove any unused resources and return them to the supply, including resources that you use to activate a card. Okay? Now, each faction may hold a certain resource, depending on the faction. As you can see here, for the barbarians, they can hold workers. During the cleanup phase, you would place any of these workers that you want to use in that area below the feature there, and you can hold them to the next round. Otherwise, every other resource would be returned to the supply. Okay? For the Romans here is swords, the Japanese is food, the Egyptians is gold. Okay? Once you have returned any unused resources, and then any resources that you use to activate different cards in the game, you will pass the first player marker to the next player on the left, and then move the round marker down 1 to the next round. Okay, now at the end of the 5th round, when all players have passed, they ended their turns, players will count up how many points they get on their player area. Okay, for each common card, they will get 1 victory point. For each faction card, they will get 2 victory points. And then whoever has the most points wins the game. Okay, if there's a tie, the player with the most workers and resources in their player board wins the game. If there's still a tie, the player with the most cards wins the game. And if there's still a tie, the player will share the victory. And that is how you play Imperial Settlers.